Good evening to you and welcome to Africa News Network First Fast Live. My name is Cindy Mabi and this is the Friday edition of ANN7 Prime. This is our top story. President Jacob Zuma has given a stern reminder to his deputy, Cyril Ramaphosa, that he was acquitted by the High Court in the Khwezi case. And this after Ramaphosa, in an interview with 702, said that he believes Khwezi has been, or rather that she was raped by the president. Ramaphosa says he understands a woman's agony of publicly admitting that she was raped. Meanwhile, in a statement, the presidency reminded Ramaphosa that a court of law has acquitted the president of the rape charges. And this has been the first admission by Ramaphosa 11 years since the judgment found President Jacob Zuma not guilty. President Zuma was acquitted of the charges in 2006 and his accuser, Khwezi, passed on last year.
Well, I have to go with the outcome of the case. And the outcome of the case led to the acquittal of President Jacob Zuma. So he was acquitted of that. But at the same time, I have to pay heed to what Khwezi also said in court. Because Khwezi herself, her story, was that yes, she was raped. I have to pay heed to that. And I have to be sympathetic. Well, I have to deal with both the issues that are germane in this case. Because the one is what the judge said. And what the judge said is not a fable. It is the reality that finally led to President Jacob Zuma's acquittal. But at the same time, there is a side of me that says, yes, there was a young woman who complained that she was raped. So I have to listen to that and pay heed to that and to pledge my sympathy and my empathy with her story. She put her evidence before the court. She did. And, you know, when you're dealing with issues of gender-based violence, when you're dealing with issues of rape, the general tendency is sometimes to dismiss. And I know how difficult and painful it is for a woman to garner up the courage to stand up and say, yes, I was raped. It must be one of the most difficult decisions that she has to make. So yes, I would believe her.
The statement by President or Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa has opened the floodgates, and with many hitting out at him for what they call political opportunism.
We were flabbergasted and were actually discussed by the statements that were made by Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa yesterday. That was the lowest point he could have ever reached when he succumbs to pressure of interview to say things that are not substantiated, things that have been cleared by court. To us, it shows a lack of principle. It shows a weak leader whom, when he is pressured, he seems to agree with anyone, just so that he is seen to be of high moral standing in society. It shows a leader willing to do anything and everything to be elected.
Well, we are really shocked by what Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa did last night. And from the side of Mkonto, he says we're Military Veterans Association, we have 6 questions that we would like to pose to him. The first one is, if Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa believed that Khwezi was raped, how did he then agree to serve as Deputy President under President Jacob Zuma? The second question is, in harboring this belief, what did he do to support Khwezi? The third question is, alternatively, if he did not believe it, but now suddenly says he does just to boost his presidential campaign, isn't this the worst kind of expediency? Is Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa now abusing the soul and memory of Khwezi for the promotion of his presidential ambitions? Is this not the worst kind of immoral expediency? And we have to ask ourselves, has Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa got no backbone at all?
Well, I think it's too little, too late. Khwezi had to suffer a lot before this kind of statement has been made public, and the support she received was very little. She was brutalized by the law enforcement agencies, by the criminal justice system, where she was seen to be the perpetrator rather than the victim. So it is too little, too late.
As you know, whatever that happened on the matter that you are referring to is something that has been duly processed. So I don't think it's something that we can revive for now. We are looking at how do you take the development agenda forward. So as military vets, our concern is how do we make sure that our people are allowed to participate in the economy, but at the same time, how do we ensure that the ANC as the leader of society is united in leading our people to take advantage in our economic system. So these are the issues that we are looking at. I mean, what you are referring to us is history, and we think due processes were followed to deal with that matter.
Meanwhile, Ramaphosa's comments have set the social media abuzz. The comments are coming through and setting Twitter wagging. One from Ayanda_Vani retweeted one from Anil Sood saying that he finds this stunt very cheap. It's nauseating that Ramaphosa would use this in an attempt to gain votes. And all the way to _Mdoda says Cyril Ramaphosa is out here saying the most about Zuma, just days ahead of the Congress. I don't trust this man at all. And Bonlo says, OC, what's your say? Asking Ntsigi Mazwai, where was Ramaphosa in 2006 when Khwezi spoke out about her rape? Now that he's a presidential candidate, he starts making noise. Who wants votes now? And another one from Sakido Kamwendo says, Cyril Ramaphosa never stood side by side with Ronnie Kasrils defending Khwezi. He is an opportunist. Suddenly he believes. And another tweet says, Ramaphosa says he believes Khwezi. I also believe the widows of Marikana. #702 Town Hall. And Tabomo Daumale says Ramaphosa believes Khwezi was raped by President Jacob Zuma. I don't think he will finish his term. And one from Tamsangla says it's a little too late, Mr. Ramaphosa. We need a presidential candidate who's got a spine. I mean, Julius Malema is a perfect man for the job. And those are the tweets that we managed to grab for you. And this brings about this question. Firstly, can the high moral stance taken by the deputy president backfire on him given his own blesser scandal? And secondly, how are the ANC delegates due to vote in 8 days' time going to view Ramaphosa's statement? And joining us live in studio, Papano Pasha from the Progressive Professionals Forum as their spokesperson. And we have Nomazokyo Memani, advocate and ANC Women's League member. And on the line is Fiso Mtweni, ANC Youth League NEC member. And you at home, the lines are open. You're most welcome to give us a call on 011-542-2186. Let's just start with Advocate Memani. If you'll give us your view in terms of was CR17 under pressure, considering Lindiwe Sisulu being on the same platform and the backlash that came from her non-committal response?
Maybe before I can answer that question, I just want to send condolences to the family of Khwezi. And I found that CR17 or Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa being a disgrace. I think I heard at the background there when he was responding that he even laughs. He even laughs. Says that he empathizes with Khwezi. He is not empathizing with Khwezi at all. Instead, he's just staging. And because he wants this vote, because he said do or die. So I think it's about his campaign, and he is not sensitive about gender-based violence. He's not sensitive about rape in this country. And he claims that he empathizes. He does not empathize because he does not know what rape is. I find him as a disgrace, actually.
All right, but what should the party then do? We saw some reactions criticizing his statement, but the ANC in itself, there are many leaders who have fallen from glory. Why should we find President or Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa's comment disingenuous?
They are disingenuous in the sense that he agreed to serve under the rapist, as he claimed that he believes Khwezi said he raped him. So how could you, if you're a moral person, how could you allow yourself to serve under the person that you believe that is a rapist? He served, and he's a coward. I think I must put it like that. He's also a coward.
Advocate Memani, just say on the lines, Fiso Mtweni, ANC Youth League NEC member, just your response and view in the expediency, or rather the timing of the claim and supposed support for Khwezi.
Well, good evening, Cindy, and your panelists, and as well as your viewers. While we appreciate that it is 8 days to go before the national conference, I think we must call on our leaders to act responsibly at all material times. Invoking the names of dead people in order to boost campaigns is negative and uncouth campaigning in our view. Also using women abuse, we're just in the middle of the 16 days of activism against no violence on women and children. But for us to use women abuse recklessly in a law-binding society, for us is very cheap. Because leaders, by the way, are bound by the constitution of this country, especially leaders in government, because you take an oath of office to uphold the rule of law and the constitution of this country. Now, the courts of this country are final arbiters on matters of dispute, as you know very well that this was a very painful period in our history, where the then Deputy President was subjected to a court case, and the court expressed itself. That judgment was never appealed. It stands. Now, for the Deputy President, in our view, to really express his own personal view when he's bound by the Constitution to uphold the rule of law was very unfortunate. And this also comes at the backdrop, as you remember very well, Cindy, that the President actually called all candidates that are campaigning for presidency of the ANC. And one of the things that the President did was to appeal that comrades must act in a responsible manner at all times. And they must ensure that in whatever campaigning that they do not harm the standing of the ANC in society. They ensure that the integrity of the ANC and integrity of themselves remains intact. Now, we are very much worried that the Deputy President had to respond in the manner that he did. We condemn it, and we think that he must be sanctioned for that particular stance that he took yesterday.
Mr. Mtoni, stay on the line, please. Papano Pasha is with the Progressive Professionals Forum. Good to have you. Thanks so much for joining us. Is this a deviation from what the Deputy President had said, that he respects the processes of the courts and the law, and yet he finds it difficult to accept what a judge, I think it was William van der Merwe at the time, who had acquitted President Jacob Zuma?
No, thank you so much, Cindy. I listened to the Deputy President yesterday, and what I could actually pick up is that Cyril Ramaphosa is actually a constitutional delinquent, mainly because he does not actually respect the Constitution. And it's so unfortunate that, he says all these things, 11 years or 10 years after Khwezi has died. It is a pity that he also says this, during the 16 days of activism against women and children. And he uses, the issue or the challenges that Khwezi faced at that particular time to fight his own political battles. I must say that it's highly disheartening, because this issue is not only political. It also speaks to issues of gender violence. It also speaks to victims of rape, and to hear the president using the death of Khwezi to fight political battles. For me, it's an act which must be addressed. I hope that the ANC, including the ANC Youth League and the ANC Women's League, will be able to take this up with the president, because it cannot be that whenever the Deputy President goes to different platforms and speaks to different audiences, he's forever changing the agenda. When he speaks to the audience, for example, that is aligned to white privilege, the agenda changes. He aligns himself to that particular audience. When he goes to the township, the agenda changes. So you are dealing with a person who's not consistent. As I had indicated the previous week, he's very consistent in being inconsistent. I think the best thing that the Deputy President could have done, in fact, yesterday, he should have resigned, to take in solidarity with Khwezi, to say that, look, I've made a mistake. I was not able to serve under President Zuma. Therefore, I'm resigning, in the name of Khwezi. But then you have a man who's saying this a couple of days before the elective conference. How sad! It's truly sad.
Advocate Memani, why shouldn't advocacy groups and particularly gender-based movements welcome what Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa had said?
No, they can't welcome such disingenuous speaking of made by the deputy president. Actually, they find, I think the gender group and violence groups, they find this thing to be an insult to women, and particularly to those who have been raped. Because, like, for example, I'm just so angry as a person, but imagine how does the family of Khwezi feel like today? The woman is dead. He kept, he made a statement some time ago to say he believed in the decision of the court, and he never made this concession that he's making now. And I think it's Papano who's saying, he is continuing to be inconsistent. He continues to be inconsistent, and then now what is he doing? He's just so personal. He is only thinking about his campaign, as he has said in his campaign, do or die. So he would say anything in order to get that position.
And Mr. Mthwane, you have the view that this timing of the admission that he believes Khwezi, Ufezekile, that she was raped, and how difficult and the trauma that women go through in having to admit to such a violation is in itself a narrative to reinforce the guilty verdict by public opinion of Jacob Zuma on this matter?
Well, you are spot on, and it's quite unfortunate because, as you know, the deputy president is appointed by the president. He's supposed to be the right-hand man of the president. He's supposed to be the most trusted of all cabinet ministers. Now, we are worried. I mean, are we saying for the last 5 years the deputy president served under a rapist? Is it all the time that the deputy president looked at the president and thought this man is a rapist? I mean, why today all of a sudden? And we don't think that, these are type of things that comrades should use in campaigning. But at the center of this, Cindy, is that the deputy president has been running a campaign, which is not gaining as much as he thought that it would. For instance, there's nothing negative that he could say about Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. All his lobbyists could not say anything negative about her. But the center of the campaign of Mr. Ramaphosa has been the attack on the president, as though Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma is representing the president in this particular campaign. And we think that this was just a final nail in the coffin, because branches will now stand up and see Mr. Ramaphosa for who he really is. He does not represent the aspirations. By the way, the ANC itself as an organization has expressed itself on this matter a long time ago. The ANC as an organization has said to South Africans that let us accept the court judgment. Let's close that unfortunate period. Let us take the country forward. For us to be taken back to that painful period, really, for us is really unfortunate. And we think that in 8 days' time, the ANC branches will really express themselves emphatically on this particular matter.
Papa, in terms of influencing the votes, and we know how politics and contestations can be murky and dirty for that matter, because it's winner takes all, the stakes are high, that this may have been an attempt to tarnish, or rather to bolster his own campaign. Is this working in your view?
Well, I think the deputy president seems to be confusing the constituency that he needs to be speaking to. For example, in terms of issues of sexual violence, what we've seen throughout, the years is that issues of sexual violence, even though they are spoken against within the ANC, one would not necessarily say that they rank very high. For example, just recently, the deputy president was accused of sleeping with 8 women. He never denied it. Instead, he said that it's political interference. He never denied it. And today he's got the moral authority to speak about Khwezi. But over and above that, remember, the deputy president, in 2012, he was in the periphery. He was nowhere. But it was, President Jacob Zuma who took him in, after the Kgalema debacle. And he was there until now. And then he has the decency to say all of these things. Surely it means that, the deputy president does not understand, as I indicated, the constituency that he's speaking to, because the constituency of the ANC, if you've looked, if you've checked, it's mainly issues, that mainly affect the poorest of the poor and the working class, issues of the land, issues of economic patterns. But the president is not speaking to those issues. And the Soweto incidents, for example, gives us a clear indication that the president is actually speaking, to elitists. He's mainly speaking to the corporate sector. He's not speaking to ANC members. It's not the people that he's actually speaking to. He's saying to them, in fact, he's saying to South Africans at large, I am different from this person. If you elect me, I will be able to change the ANC. Hence he's speaking about the New Deal. So he's someone who sees himself outside of the ANC.
But what is wrong, Advocate Memane, if he believes that justice or the system failed Khwezi in his personal capacity and wanting to articulate that?
You know what is wrong with him? Just because he only came now, he has been there, he kept quiet, and as I said earlier on, he allowed to serve under the rapist. He allowed himself to be appointed by a rapist. Because that's what he is saying. That's why I find him to be not sensitive to the family, and then also not, and also disregarding the court decision.
Advocate Nomazokyo Memane, advocate and a member of the ANC Women's League, we thank you very much. Just very briefly, in closing, Mr. Motsweni, going forward, if this indeed will be a masterstroke to tarnish perhaps NDZ's campaign, or whether this will backfire in your view for Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa?
Well, from day one, Cindy, NDZ has suffered the most as a candidate of the ANC. She's been called an ex-wife. She's been labeled all sorts of things. They've said that she's sponsored by the Gupta family. Generally, she's had a very bad, media, overview in this particular campaign. But as we have seen, the outcomes of the branch nominations, the outcomes of the Provincial General Council, ANC branches, ordinary members and men and women of the ANC have rejected that particular narrative. They have said that she's quite capable. In fact, for the first time in the history of the country, you have a woman not only contesting presidency, but she has actually met all the requirements and the threshold to stand. Next week, we are going to disregard everything. By the way, it's going to intensify. Other things are going to be said because the other side is desperate now because they can see that the reality of the NDZ presidency is here. And next week, some of us who are already voting delegates in that particular conference will enter in there and will live on the 20th with Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma being president. No amount of Khwezi or any other involvement will change that particular reality.
All right, Sfisa Motsweni, ANC Youth League, NEC member, thank you so much. And to Advocate Memane as well, thank you so much for joining us on the line. We'll wrap it up in studio with Papano in the sense that, some have called Cyril Ramaphosa an opportunist, others saying a snake, others seeing him as a savior that's going to lead South Africa to greener pastures, as it were. Which one do you pick?
Well, I think in the short term, he will save South Africa because, remember, corporate South Africa has decided to go on an investment strike. So they have said that if Deputy President is elected as the president, they will start injecting money. But that only means that, the Deputy President is prepared to sign a pact with the devil. So in the long run, it means that South Africans, they would conform to structural programs of the IMF, to the business and so forth. So I don't think that it will work in the long. In the short run, it might work, but in the long run, I think many South Africans would start questioning why they would have supported the deputy president.
But the nature of interviews is that you're not given questions beforehand, and they are follow-up questions that you may not necessarily have anticipated. So you have to think on your feet and respond. Do you think that it's something that he didn't necessarily ventilate in his mind before the response, and of course not knowing what the backlash would be?
Well, I wouldn't answer that. I can't answer that because, I'm not Cyril. But as I've indicated, he's very inconsistent. So you would never know if, he was caught in the moment. You wouldn't know if he was faced by the audience because the majority of the audience was mainly 702 listeners. And those are listeners who in the main are anti-government. The majority of people who are there are anti-government, they're anti-ANC, but they're pro-Cyril Ramaphosa. which is a concern on its own. So I don't think it's a question of the audience. It speaks to the character of the deputy president. He's just not consistent.
And in political experience, in that obviously in the lead up to the ANC elective race, that he needs to speak, speak to the gallery, say the right things to the right audience. Is that your view?
But which right audience? Because this conference is the conference of ANC delegates. Unfortunately, it's not the conference of, your liberals, for example. It's a conference of a majority of South Africans, as I've indicated, who are poor and who are working class. So that must be his focus. But now his focus is on appeasing those who have the capital, those who have exploited and who continue to exploit and oppress the majority of South Africans. So this man cannot be trusted. He cannot be trusted with our democracy. He cannot be trusted with what the ANC calls its national democratic revolution. How do you expect this man to lead the revolution when he's everywhere and nowhere? Because one would assume that to lead this NDR, you need to be attitude, you need to be disciplined, high morale. So Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa has proven that he's not that type of man. In fact, I think he would do better in the DA. I think that would be the right platform where he will be able to thrive, where he will be able to pursue the type of politics that he speaks of. But in the ANC itself, which is a disciplined force of the left, whose character, is mainly to pursue issues of the working class, I don't think he's in the right organization.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. The views from our panelists saying that this will definitely backlash for Cyril Ramaphosa in now 11 years or so coming forward in saying that he believes Khwezi was raped by the president. And thanks also for your tweets on this particular subject. We're back after this.